As I go through the marketplace, I find this thirst that people have far beyond making money. Even for those that have made money, still lack this sense of fulfillment and purpose. As I thought about the way in which God has trialed me, refined me, blessed me in a myriad of different areas, the four core areas that I think have been fundamental in where I am today is faith, fitness, finance, and freedom. Freedom from abuse, right? I would say that at one season in my life that I was a functioning alcoholic, right? We call it getting lit, but getting lit is alcoholism.
So we're here at the 40 Acres Conference, and I got to witness my guy, Brian Addison, on the stage. And I said to him behind the scenes, like, this is one of the best panels I've seen in a while. Because, panels can be kind of whack. It's like fluffy, it's not a lot of information. But one of the things that they talked about in this panel was more of a spiritual side of things. And I thought it was so apropos that you're building something called Believers in Business.
Yeah.
And I've always said that you're as much a spiritual giant as you are a business giant. So could you talk about where that stems and why create Believers in Business and why now?
So before I answer that, did you say apropos?
Yes, I did.
Oh my God, did y'all hear this? I didn't hear nothing else he said other than that, right? I'll Google it later, okay? Maybe we can put the definition on the screen for everybody because maybe somebody else got stuck at that juncture as well. Jesus Christ, let me get some Grey Poupon too. So, the whole Believers in Business, it was a vision God gave me, man, I want to say at the start of 2022, so almost 2 years now.
Wow.
And we started putting framework around it, and it was initially going to be a podcast, just to highlight people like yourself, right? Instruments for the kingdom that's really doing amazing things that don't separate God and business.
Yeah.
It was different iterations that we had for the podcast, and then, my real estate business had really started to just cannibalize other things that I wanted to do in that season.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that's interesting about God is he gives us a download, but it's not always meant to execute right then in that moment.
That's true.
But it is intended for you to write down in that moment.
Right.
Because at some point you will need to execute that thing because he gave you the download nonetheless.
That's right.
And just being obedient and sensitive to the season I was in, God just, the door was closing. And so I said, okay, that's not a no, it's not right now. And thank God it wasn't, because by the time that here we are 2 years later, it's got a totally different anatomy than just the podcast.
Right.
The podcast almost is the afterthought, believe it or not. Now it's more about, as I go through the marketplace, I find this thirst that people have far beyond making money.
True.
And even for those that have made money, still lack this sense of fulfillment and purpose. And so as I thought about the way in which God has trialed me, refined me, blessed me in a myriad of different areas, the four core areas that I think have been fundamental in where I am today, not just from a successful perspective, but from a personally successful perspective, is faith, fitness, finance, and freedom. Freedom from abuse, right?
Yeah.
I would say that at one season in my life that I was a functioning alcoholic, right? We call it getting lit, but getting lit is alcoholism. And then fitness, right? 17 years ago, I had gained 60 pounds, never thought I could gain weight, and I did. But for 17 years, I've kept it off.
Wow.
Right? And then the faith piece is everything for me. It's the foundation by which I stand on, by I set my day on, by I close my day on.
Right.
And it's everything in between throughout that process. And I just know that at the end of the day, unless or until we have a relationship with the one that created us, what quality of life can we really have?
That's real. That's real.
Right?
100.
And so, so faith, fitness, freedom, and then finances. Finances are very important.
Right.
We want God to bless us, but are we in position to do so? Are we in position to steward it well? Are we in position to manage it well?
Yeah.
Are we in position to do those two things well enough so that we can then be the conduit to bless other people through our activity?
Yeah.
And I've had seasons of being a broke tither, where yeah, I was making money, I was obedient in giving, and he was obedient in keeping me.
Yeah.
But I couldn't get beyond that point because fundamentally I still didn't have my budget set up the right way. Gave him his off the top, but everything else was everything else. And you will never make enough money to get out of that cycle.
Wow.
You only reset that by getting some good fundamentals in place with budgeting. And that's where it really all starts.
Yeah.
Because money is called currency for a reason. It flows.
Ooh, that's good.
Right?
Yeah.
And if we know anything about electricity, it flows to the least path of resistance. Our money being no different.
Right.
So if you don't tell it where to go and give it an assignment, it will freely flow wherever it wants to. And then we don't calculate the Amazons and the Starbucks and that's where it flows to. And so when you take care of your core four, your house, your vehicle, your insurance and taxes,
right,
it's like, well, where did the rest of it go? To the least path of resistance.
Wow, that's deep. Man, so something you said also from the stage was, and I don't know if most people, even believers, operate in this, is you're the CEO, co-CEO, and he's the CEO. Break that down. What's that about?
Every good and perfect gift comes from the God, right? And so if I deem my business as a source that provides not only finances to live, but in excess to do phenomenal things in terms of quality of life for my family and even others, then that's got to be his. Because and I think this is part of the problem, right? So I come from corporate America, where I think many times we fall under the pretense that we go to work, we get paid, which is why a lot of people approach their job in a way that they do, from a place of spite, from a place of ingratitude, because they don't view their job as something God gave them. And so I don't know why I just said that. I just felt it was necessary to, because I think that's a chronic issue where when you make that transition from corporate to then a business, you could almost look at it the same way, like my business does this, and I'm gonna honor God with what I get personally from the business, not acknowledging that the origin of the provision came from him, period.
Whoa.
And so that's the way that I look at the business, and at the end of the day, it's his, and it's my job to help manage it, steward it, and all those things that he wants me to do so that he can do what his will is through me.
Yeah, respect. Well, take us behind the scene, man, because we know the scripture, what's done in the dark comes to the light. We always hear about it in like, oh, they're doing something shiesty behind the scenes, is going to come to the light. But it also works in another way where whatever you're, doing in the dark, as far as even the soil, you talked about soil, which I'd love to get into that. The soil it's growing underneath the ground. It's dark. Nobody knows. There's the grind. There's the time. But I want to apply that to a very intimate thing, your closet time, your time with God behind the scenes, away from everybody. So if you could speak about that and how paramount that is to your success and who you are.
Yeah, I don't know how to operate in life without it at this point. Like, I can't remember when I started, but I know that I can't stop. It's the thing that keeps me moving. It's the thing that keeps me sane, legitimately.
Wow.
And so I start off in that posture every morning. It's tough when I travel to replicate that environment, especially if I'm traveling alone, one thing, traveling with my wife, another. Shout out to my wife. That's no knock against you, baby. But it is different when you're on the road, right? Sure. And so, but when I do have the consistency of being in my normal place, in my quiet place with him, it's just an honest place, bro.
Yeah.
It's an honest place. Most days, probably me complaining more than anything, and having to check myself. But even on those days, I find myself later in the afternoon, like, forgive me, Lord, right? I repent my posture. But no, it really is just a place of surrender.
Wow.
And so let that come out I think a lot of the time for believers, we so focused on everything being so antiseptic with God. He already knows what's on your heart anyway, so why not articulate that, right? The idea is to come as you are, just not to stay as you are. And so I just lay it all at his feet, even if it come out like vomit.
Right.
And then let him help to refine whatever that is that he's trying to distill for me to be able to receive in his own way. And I asked him for help in the midst of doing that. I'm just not complaining, as my pastor would say, complaining and praying at the same time. Call it complaining. I'm just not complaining, but I really am asking him, help me to better process this. Help me to better carry this, as I know you carrying the bulk of the load, but for my part of the assignment, help me to do better with that. And particularly, it comes from one of the worst things that happens to us as believers, right? Is that you're anointed for an appointment, and then that time in between a disappointment. And I feel like I've been stuck in that season for quite some time now. There's no doubt in my mind that God has called me to do some tremendous things. As I've been able to do it, I'm talking about well beyond my realm of understanding, and right? And I'm not, and I'm saying that to encourage y'all. I'm not saying that to boost me, because he's got plans for you too. You just need to seek him and talk to him about that. But in that, I'm a executor.
Yeah.
Some people are initiators, others are executors. I'm an executor. So now that I know there's big vision, every day I'm looking for like a flashlight in the daytime, right? And he like, no, go back and tend the sheep. They came with the oil, told you what it is, but you got to go back and tend the sheep, because what you're waiting on is not ready for you yet. And I need you to get ready for it. And so, I know that's a long-winded answer, but you asked what's going on in that closet.
Absolutely.
It's a daily battle of me having to die to my flesh and yield to his will. And you're really checking your heart posture, man, because, at the end of the day, he's going to have his way.
That's right.
And if you do it out of order, you're going to end up with disappointment, whether you thought that you got what you wanted or not. And I've done that already.
Wow.
So that's the biggest tension is, for the first 35 years of my life, I was operating outside of his will, because seed and harvest is principle, not just biblical, right? And if you go out and the quality of the seeds you sow will be indicative of the fruit that you reap. And I sowed some bad seeds and got some bad fruit. Not necessarily that anything I was doing was felonious per se, but just the fact that because it was out of season, a blessing out of season is a curse. And so I was still empty because it didn't come with the peace. It didn't come with, the peace. Honestly, that's the biggest thing that I was missing, was the peace. I was still torn inside, although I had all the financial success that I thought would have given me the peace that I was looking for. But because it didn't have Jesus' footprint on it or fingerprint on it, I didn't have that peace.
Wow.
And, for the last 5 years, I've been more instrumental of submitting to his and surrendering to his will. Wow. And it's tough, but it's better because at least you're working on the right thing.
I see.
Right. And I think for me at this point in my life, I'm so tired of do-overs. I would much rather work on the right thing in the right season, even if it not be the thing that I necessarily desire to work on.
Wow. Man, I want to double click on something you just said again. A blessing out of season is a curse.
Yeah.
Wow. Can you speak to a moment where that was? I kind of have an idea, because I know we've had conversations where you talked about miserable millions.
Yeah.
Right? But could you go into that? Because I think our culture, especially today, very instant gratification driven. So it's like, man, I got the Lambo, I got the da 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 da. I got a coaching business with 100 coaching clients, right? And that sounds great, but it sounds like a blessing, like you said, a blessing out of season is a curse.
Yeah. Yeah, because until you become the person to do the thing that he promised you could have, if you do it in any other way, if you have the thing before you become the person, if you do the thing before you become the person, that edict of be, do, have, you have to do it in that order to get the fulfillment of the blessing. And I hadn't become the person to really be the one touching millions as I was at that season in my life. And I didn't know how to really handle the responsibility of that. I didn't know how to handle all the challenges that came with that. And so here I am still turning to counterfeit. I'm still turning to drinking. I'm still doing business with people that I couldn't stomach being around. But for the opportunity again, I was willing to make that sacrifice, as I thought it in my mind, as just being a fundamental part of going out and pursuing, the success that I wanted. Yeah. And God wasn't there because the relationships were not healthy for me. Some even caused me to potentially lose my marriage. Wow. Right. And it just wasn't a healthy season of my life. And everything that I thought I wanted and that I had because I finally got the money, wasn't it? Wow.
I think that's a message for so many people, especially in our culture today. You also said something about soil that I'd never heard, and you were breaking down how the soil is, I mean, the seed is one thing, but the environment of that soil is just as important as even the seed. Could you break that down?
Yeah. You know, one thing about God that I'm starting to appreciate more, because again, I'm more of a linear, like, visionary, but more execution, right? And so I don't have that B side of my brain that works a lot. Not those closest to me say, yeah, you do more than you give yourself credit. But from my understanding, I don't.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that I'm starting to get now more is the imagery of God, the way that he paints the scriptures and the things that he means behind the coding of them, and which he promised us also that his people would, the scripture would reveal itself. Amen. Right?
That's
for those
right.
that aren't, it won't.
That's right.
And that's happening to me in real time.
Wow.
And you know, he references a lot about the farmer, right? Farming, because he knows that it's such a universal thing and everybody has to have some level of understanding about it, that we'll be able to get from it what he's intending to. And so when you look at a farmer, every season they got to till the soil. Well, like, why wouldn't they just go and just throw down new seed on that previous dirt? Because they know that the soil isn't prepared for the seed to take root to have a good harvest.
Whoa.
And so same is true in our life. Like, we got old soil from seasons of being in environments and with people and having certain habits that aren't conducive to the new season that we're trying to give birth to and have a harvest with. And so we got to go and till the soil.
Yeah.
And for many people, tilling is work.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you ain't got an automatic.
True.
Which, if you just starting out as a farmer, you probably won't.
Right.
So you out there with some manual labor having to till that soil is work.
Right.
But in order to get what you really want out of that seed is requisite.
That's deep, man. I had never heard it the way as you broke that down. Like, you know, you read the Bible and you hear, you know, about the seed. You don't think about some of the soil, the elements that God is very holistic. All these different pieces add together, they all need to work. So I thought that was profound. One thing I got to say I was a little bit shocked by. I've heard you say this behind the scenes, but it's evident this is where you're going. Is the vision for you is to be a freedom coach?
Yeah.
All right, because people that know you know you as a real estate entrepreneur, 120 plus units, you know, done all over 100 flips, and all this amazing stuff that you've done. And it sounds like that you're entering a new dimension, not forsaking the old and the things that you're doing now, but it sounds like there's a new dimension of Brian going into a freedom coach.
Yeah, I believe another issue for us as people, especially those that have had success in certain areas of life. Take a pro athlete, for instance.
Yeah.
They know their time has come.
Right.
But they just resist it because that's what's been familiar to them for the last 2 decades. And they're scared of what that next season of their life looks like. Because for the first time, they won't be able to identify with the thing that they used to do at such a high level.
Wow.
With me, I'm noticing with God, just stay open-handed.
Wow.
Love things for the time that you have them, but don't love them to a point that you don't want to let them go. And I never want him to have to take something from my hand and it bleeds out because I'm resistant to just opening up and letting it go. Now, I'm not saying, again, that this is a season of forsaking the aforementioned.
Right.
But if it is, I'm okay with that.
Whoa.
Because the thing that you can't deny what lights you up. What lights me up is helping people.
Yeah.
Helping people get free in all 4 pillars: faith, fitness, finance, and freedom from strongholds. Because he's given me so much life experience. Like, at the end of the day, you should always get an ROI on anything that you do in life. And I want to get a return on investment from the pain that I've endured.
Amen.
I want to profit from my pain.
Right.
And profit not in the sense of financially, profit from the sense of watching other people take this information and be able to go out and become who they need to become.
That's real.
And that's the thing I'm most passionate about. I get to do that to some degree through my real estate teaching.
Yeah.
But I get to really step into it now with this Believers in Business platform. While they may learn some real estate, it's very much so going to be, you know, forward facing on those 4 pillars and helping people in all walks of life and area, and especially those that aspire to be in business or are in business, get solid in those 4 areas.
I love it, man. Speaking of which, right, you also launched a new endeavor to your coaching side of your business that has not been something that you've exclusively focused on. Can you tell us about that? This is more of a dynamic that's kind of going that direction of the Freedom Coach, where you're helping people with offers, you're helping people with thinking in alignment of who their value is, how they market themselves, create info products, create an info business like you have successfully. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's our print money program. And I mean, it is what it says it is, right? Because legitimately, if you find out how to build your coaching business or your consulting business fundamentally sound, you can actually print money at will. And you know this,
Yes,
like
sir.
if you got a funnel that's set up the right way, you got an irresistible offer, you can literally go to your sphere of influence, put that thing out, make an offer, and start printing money, okay?
That's right.
And, you know, much like every other area of my life, you know, God got his way, man. Like, I'm the first one through the door and I get my teeth kicked in every time on anything that I do. But now I'm starting to understand it's for a purpose. So I try to just lean into it instead of resist it as I did before.
Right.
And no different. Like I went through dozens of marketing companies. I've lost a tremendous amount of money as a coach, you know, in marketing, hundreds of thousands of dollars, just not knowing what to do. Didn't have a coach myself. I did in real estate, but not in business in this capacity until recent years. And I suffered from it. And I know that many other people suffer from it because most of them, they have the IP. They don't know how to package and deliver it.
That's right.
And they don't quite know how to run their business effectively.
Yep.
Because fulfillment is your best marketing. So let's start there, right?
Man.
And when you get so focused on trying to make a dollar, sometimes the fulfillment is what slacks off. And so we have to first build a firewall around the fulfillment to make it super tight,
for sure.
so that while you're out there marketing and selling, that the most important thing, which are the people that have already bought, are well taken care of.
Respect. And you know, you don't hear people in the information marketing space say what you just said about fulfillment. They talk only about how can I get people in? But I know just from hearing from your students, meeting some of your students, that y'all take great care of the people you serve and steward them well. So if you could speak to the fact of this fulfillment, and where did that stem for you? Did you always have that mindset? Did you, when you went through the miserable millions season, is that where that shift happened? How did you get to this, the understanding that fulfillment is the best marketing?
I always had a heart to. Because my dad raised me, look a man square in his eyes, shake his hand firm, keep your word. You do them things in life, you're gonna be all right. Sounded crazy at 7.
Wow.
But now I'm noticing how, and I just was having a conversation, texting with my daughter, because she had to have a difficult conversation with someone recently. And when she was home for Christmas, we talked about it, and she was letting me know that she had that conversation. And I told her, I said, you will set yourself apart from 90% of the world just by doing what you did. Keeping your word, because most people are cowards.
It's true.
Right? And there's gonna be time in business where it's gonna be challenging to keep your word, not because you didn't want to, but because circumstances just didn't allow you to.
Right.
But then there's other times where you could just be belligerent and just don't care.
Right.
Right? I was never belligerent and didn't care, but I was compromised at a point when I wasn't truly fulfilled, and I thought the money was fulfilling, and so that became more important than anything else. Okay? And the team I had surrounded myself with at that point in time also subscribed to that doctrine, bad doctrine.
Yeah.
And so I believe that early on there was some fumbles on the fulfillment side.
Gotcha.
You know, not from a malicious heart,
Right.
but from a misdirected approach.
Gotcha.
And so after seeing that, it became the most important thing to me, almost to a point where I overcorrected. And then I became a slave to the business, so to speak.
Yeah.
And you have to still make sure that people understand that you have a framework for a reason, there's boundaries for a reason, and the business should be able to give them the end result without you having to compromise to great lengths those boundaries and systems that you set in place.
Right.
There's always going to be nuance because it is business, And, you know, we love our people. I got a heart to serve anyway. And as I know you do, so we jump in and do things we probably shouldn't do that most people would condemn us for, right? Some of our contemporaries, but it is that though. And it's, you know, I went through a season of having to find grace for myself, you know, and just trust like, no, you're doing it the right way.
Yeah.
And just because you may get met with some resistance because somebody don't like the call that you made, don't mean it was the wrong call, right? It's just that maybe that was the wrong client.
Yeah.
Or the wrong client for that season. So now I'm just very particular about even the clients I work with because I do want a certain quality of life. Absolutely. And I believe you can have both. I believe you can have a certain quality of life and a certain quality of business.
That's right.
And if you run it the right way, you steward it well, and part of that stewardship is even who you do business with because all money ain't good money.
That's good. That's a good point right there. And I mean, I got a chance to hear some of some of the testimonies and people that have worked with you, and one of them, specifically Jen, hearing that testimony for the first time about how she dealt with fear and pushed past fear. I imagine that's a quality you look for. I don't know, you know, always on the front end, can you tell what type of caliber person is somebody going to be? But in this season of business, in this season of life, how do you identify those Jens of the world, those Dariuses of the world, those types of people that will not only respect your voice in their life to execute on what you tell them to do, even in a tough turn or amidst of fear, amidst of a real estate, you know, increases in interest rates and things of that nature, or with the changing information space world? How do you essentially select who you can pour into?
Discernment on the front end. I legitimately, as much as my bandwidth will allow, that I know who's coming in, which 90% of the time I do. Sometimes people may come in through other avenues that I don't get to, but I'm discerning. Like from the time that I know that there's an opportunity there, I'm praying about it. Sometimes I pray with them on the call.
Wow.
Because at the end of the day, it's not, see, as business owners, we get so focused on the through that we forget about the front. And so I always want to make sure that I'm not focused on who's in front of me as the through and making sure that they came from him.
Whoa.
Right?
Yeah.
So as I do that, that's how I better discern who I'm supposed to do business with and I'm not. And I oftentimes pray, if it's not your will, don't let it happen. As painful as that may be. You may be in a lull financially and you need it, but I've just learned that instant gratification, that check you collect, becomes a painful, like you would pay him twice to leave. And I just rather not do it. I'd rather wait on him because everything comes from him anyway.
That's right.
And I don't get to dictate to him how he blesses me.
That's good. That's good. I got a chance to really see you speak a lot this weekend, man. And I gotta say, I've been around elite speakers for most of my professional career. And I say this with all humility, you're elite as a speaker. And my hope is that you go into this realm. What are your thoughts on exploring the possibility of making a commitment to speak on more stages and take this desire and burden to set people free, you know, across cities, nations, and even continents?
I'm committed.
Yeah.
It is the thing that bothers me most of all the things I do. And I think it's just a personal thing, right? I'm not a perfectionist, but I am an executor and I like to execute well. And I also prepare so that I can execute well.
Yeah.
But then there's always that doubt and it's the noise between the ears and, you know, but if I got to be completely honest, there's also a sense of control there that I don't get to have in that capacity. If you're doing it the right way, because you should be adhering to the people that's there and feeding them based off of what they need, not based off of what you've prepared. Right. And as one of our mentors would say, a prepared man is better than a prepared message.
That's right.
And so on this quest, you know, I've been very, that's the thing that's been most unnerving to me, which is crazy because it seemingly always goes well.
Yes.
But it's just that, right? But I also now see, after doing it and running more reps, the effectiveness of it.
Yeah.
And I just can't curate content good enough to replicate what that is that happens in that room in that moment.
Right.
And so it's now that I've made it less about me and more about him and them, I'm ready.
Wow. That's what's up, man. What's your biggest takeaway from this whole experience, being out here in Houston and coming to this conference? You know, sometimes you get a message God is showing you in the midst of an experience you're already coming to prepare for, but he's giving you something, a download from the whole experience. What are you taking away from this experience thus far?
His faithfulness. Even as something as grand as getting arguably one of the biggest awards that you've gotten so far in your career, that with every blessing there's a burden. There's always another side to it. And I mean, as I sit here right now and we're talking, I'm in pain dealing with an ailment that popped up weeks before this event. And I've actually got a procedure to happen when I get back this upcoming week. And so one would say, this came up, I shouldn't go, right? And for me, it's like, no, God, I just need you. You hold all power. You gave me the yes to go to the thing 6-8 weeks ago. Although this came up, although the discomfort, the pain, all the rest of it, I still feel like I'm on assignment. And I had a group of people that I needed to speak to. And yesterday confirmed that clearly I was supposed to be here to have that conversation based on the impact that happened. And so, yeah, I think the thing I learned most is just another level of trusting him in all circumstances. And I'm not saying this to say for anybody to put themselves in harm's way. You know, there was a lot of prayer, a lot of discernment, a lot of consideration surrounding making that decision.
Right.
But it was one that needed to be made. And again, and to give him all the glory, both times when I spoke, actually count that a third now, during the event, no pain. In that, during that moment. Now, as I sit here right now, I'm back in pain again, but during that moment, no pain. And even during the awards for 4 hours on the first night, no pain. And so he's faithful, but you'll never know how faithful he is if you don't step out on faith.
That's good.
Which is why it says faith without works is dead. You can't, I would never know how great he is if I didn't take those leaps of faith at moments in which I think that I'm dealing with an issue that's permanent. And he showed me just how temporary that it could be based on his will.
Man, I think that's a great closeout right there. That's a lot of wisdom, a lot of gems. This is something you need to rewatch and rewatch and rewatch again, because there's so much wisdom that is uncovered in this conversation.